Thank you all for being here, and senators who are in attendance virtually. And let me thank Shalanda Young, the acting director of OMB, for being with us. And let me thank Senator Graham for his help as ranking member. A federal budget speaks to who we are as a nation and where we want to be in the future. And I think, as everybody knows, this last year has been one of the worst years in our lifetimes for our country and, in fact, for the world. In the United States, we have endured the worst public health crisis in 100 years. We have lost over some 600,000 people to COVID, and we have also endured the worst economic collapse since the Great Depression of the 1930s. The very good news is I believe we are making significant progress in fighting our way out of both of those disasters. In terms of the pandemic, more and more Americans are being vaccinated, and the death rate is going down significantly. In my own state of Vermont, we're up to about 80% of our people who have been vaccinated, and that type of trend is going on all over the country. Obviously, we still have an enormous amount of work to do, but the good news is we are making progress. Economically, we are also moving forward in the right direction. Millions of jobs have been created in the last few months as the economy reopens all across America. And one of the reasons, in my view, for our success has been the American Rescue Plan that the President signed into law in March. $1,400 direct payment that about 85% of our people received was enormously helpful in easing the anxiety and the pain and the distress that so many people were feeling. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to talk to people who received those checks, but for a family of four, that was just life-saving. The American Rescue Plan, in a major way, has begun to cut childhood poverty because of the $3,600 child tax credit that we are providing to working families all across America. During the pandemic in my state, and I expect in all of your states, there were long lines of people lining up for emergency food. Hard to believe that's taking place in America. It was. We are making progress in reducing hunger in America. We are expanding, as a result of the American Rescue Plan, health care for people who need it. We're improving educational opportunities. We're providing summer and after-school programs for our kids. The American Rescue Plan provided an extra $300 a week in unemployment benefits to millions of workers who lost their jobs through no fault of their own. And the American Rescue Plan also is preventing millions of Americans from being thrown out onto the streets because they could not afford their rent. It is also preventing over 1 million workers and retirees from seeing their pensions slashed by up to 60%. In other words, that is a very significant piece of legislation that came at a time when working families in this country desperately needed help. But let us be clear. While we are making progress in protecting working families, an enormous amount of work remains before us. In the richest country in the history of the world, the working families of this country continue to struggle economically, with millions of our people continuing to live in desperation. Sometimes inside the Beltway, we can forget that reality. But literally speaking, 3 blocks from this building, there are people sleeping in tents out on the street, and the desperation exists from one end of this country to the other in every one of our states. Real wages, inflation accounted for wages in America, are lower today than they were 48 years ago. Think about that. Huge explosion in productivity, in technology, average American worker in real wages making less than he or she did 48 years ago. And frighteningly, and the young people know this, the younger generation stand an excellent chance, if we don't turn it around, of having a lower standard of living than their parents. In other words, we're moving in exactly the wrong direction. Today in America, over half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck, and millions are trying to get by on $8, $9, $10 an hour, which in my view is a starvation wage. In terms of health care, we remain the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people, and yet we pay the highest prices in the world for health care. 90 million people are uninsured. 1 out of 4 people cannot afford the cost of a prescription drug their doctor prescribes because we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Over 500,000 Americans are homeless today, and some 18 million households spend at least half of their incomes in housing. How the hell do you survive when you spend half of your income in housing? Meanwhile, while working families struggle, the very richest people in this country are doing unbelievably well. 2 people own more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American nation. And let me be as clear as I can be. The decisions that we make as a Congress will determine the very future of this nation. I'm not just talking about the movement toward authoritarianism and the attacks on democracy, which we are seeing every day. We are determining whether or not we are going to have an economy that works for all of us or just the very wealthiest people in this country.